I made it in the car.
Maya, sweetie, no.
But you said.
And he's right here, Mommy. Look, Marcus.
Bye, Daddy.
See you at home.
Marcus Vance here. The paper was thick, slightly smudged around the edges with yellow crayon, but the big red letters in the middle were impossible to miss. Mommy said, "You are my daddy." A 4-year-old girl with dark, tumbling curls was leaning across the polished mahogany table of the bistro booth, holding it out with both hands like a peace treaty. She was beaming, pure, unfiltered, toothy pride. "I made it in the car," she said, her voice carrying over the low hum of the dinner rush. Mommy helped me spell the big words, but I drew the hearts all by myself. I didn't reach for it. My thumb pressed hard into my own jaw, and for a second I just looked at the drawing like it might change if I waited long enough. Across the table, sitting right beside the little girl, was Elena Sterling. She'd gone pale, her dark eyes wide, her lower lip caught between her teeth. 5 years of complete, radio-silent absence, and now she was sitting 3 feet away from me in a warmly lit coastal bistro while her daughter handed me a piece of paper that felt like it weighed 50 pounds. "Maya," Elena managed, her voice barely a whisper. She reached out, tugging at the girl's sleeve. "Sweetie, no. We talked about this. You were supposed to wait in the car with the bag. But you said he was inside." Maya turned to her, brows knitting together in that intense, stubborn way little kids get when a rule feels unfair. "You said the man in the picture was the chef who makes the building stay up. And he's right here, Mommy. Look." I couldn't look away from Elena's eyes. Panic there, and under it something older and more tired that didn't belong in a room full of people clinking wine glasses. "Marcus," Elena whispered. Just my name. No explanation. Just the sound of it hanging in the narrow space between us. 3 days ago, I'd driven back into Harbor Cove for a contract I'd spent 2 weeks trying to hand off to a junior partner. The Old Bay Bistro needed a full structural overhaul before the winter tides hit, and I was the only one left who knew where the load-bearing beams were hidden behind the plaster. 48 hours, inspect the joists, sign the permits, leave before the town noticed. That had been the plan. Instead, I was sitting in a booth with a cup of cold espresso, watching the ghost of my past try to figure out how to pull her 4-year-old back into the dark. "I'm sorry," Elena said, her voice dropping into that flat, over-rehearsed tone people use when they're trying not to break down in public. "She found a photo in my purse this morning. I didn't know she brought it into the restaurant." "A photo?" I repeated. My voice came out rough. "It doesn't matter," she said quickly, grabbing for Maya's hand. Maya didn't want her hand grabbed. She was still looking at me, waiting for me to take the drawing. "We shouldn't have come in. The manager said you were in the back office, and I thought I could ask if you were still in town. I didn't know you were sitting right here." She stood up so fast her chair scraped against the wood floor, a sharp noise that made 2 people at the nearest table turn around. "Elena, wait," I said, finally finding my feet. "Don't," she breathed, backing toward the front doors, pulling Maya along behind her. Maya looked back over her shoulder, waving, still holding the yellow and red paper. "Bye, Daddy," she called out, completely untroubled by the tension suffocating the room. "See you at home." The heavy oak door clicked shut behind them, cutting off the ocean breeze that had swept in, leaving me standing in the middle of a bustling dining room with 50 pairs of eyes slowly returning to their meals. 10 minutes later, I was in the back alley, forearms against the brick, staring at the gray tide rolling into the marina. My phone buzzed. "Julian, my site foreman. Permits are approved for the timber framing. We start tear out tomorrow at 7. I typed back. "Hold off on the main dining room floor." Something came up. I didn't tell him the something was that 5 years ago, Elena had walked out of my apartment on a rainy Tuesday night, left her engagement ring on the kitchen counter next to an unpaid electric bill, and married a real estate heir named Arthur Sterling less than 3 weeks later. I hadn't chased her. In this town, when a woman leaves a guy with sawdust on his boots to marry a man who owns half the oceanfront acreage in the county, nobody asks hard questions. They just feel sorry for the guy and tell him he's better off. I'd believed them. For 5 years, I'd built a quiet, efficient life out of that belief. "You're going to burn a hole in that wall if you keep staring at it like that." I turned. Sarah, the bistro's general manager, was holding a manila folder under one arm. The only person in town who still used my middle name when she was annoyed. She didn't say why she was back, I said. Arthur died 14 months ago, Sarah said. Heart attack on a boat off Cabo. I hadn't heard that. How? You've been living out of a toolbox in Seattle and San Diego. How would you have? She leaned against the doorframe. His brothers didn't take it well when she kept the house. They've been dragging her through probate since November. For what? Fit to manage the estate, that's the phrase they're using. Sarah's mouth twisted like the words tasted bad. There's a custody piece too. Partial. Custody. I said it flat, like the word might rearrange itself into something less ugly. Maya, Sarah said. I looked down at my hands, calloused, still gray with wood sealer. Why'd she come to the bistro today? Sarah pulled a folded sheet from the folder and held it out instead of explaining it. Read it. It was a formal notice of intent to sell, dated 3 days ago. Arthur's firm had held the mortgage notes on 4 commercial properties along the waterfront. This one included. She's not just losing a husband, Sarah said quietly. If that sale goes through, she loses the house her kid grew up in too. Same trust, same signature. By 8 that evening, the fog had rolled in off the bay, wrapping the street lamps along Cliff Drive in wet gray gauze. I drove up the gravel driveway of the old Miller estate, a sprawling clapboard house on the ridge that hadn't seen fresh paint since the mid-90s. One light on, ground floor. I sat in the truck a full minute, listening to the engine tick. The safe part of me said, turn around, go back to the motel, leave the legal mess to the lawyers. Then I saw the yellow drawing where I'd shoved it under the visor. I knocked 3 times on the brass knocker. Footsteps, quick and hushed. The door opened 2 inches, caught on the chain. Marcus, Elena said through the gap. What are you doing here? You left this, I said, holding up the smudged paper, and Sarah gave me the sale notice. She looked at the drawing for 3 long seconds before she unhooked the chain. She's asleep, Elena said, stepping back to let me in. She cried herself out because she thought you were mad at her for drawing on the table paper. I wasn't mad. I told her that. She led me down a hallway into a kitchen that looked like a battleground of paperwork. Manila folders, legal briefs, a mug of tea gone cold in the middle of it all. You don't have to be here, Elena said, arms crossed, back against the counter. This isn't your problem. I don't care about Arthur's family, I said, setting the drawing down on a clear spot on the island. I care about why a 4-year-old thinks I'm her father. Something in Elena's shoulders gave out. She looked smaller under the bare kitchen light. It's not what you think, she said. Then tell me. She didn't. Not right away. She picked up the cold mug, put it back down without drinking from it, like her hands needed something to do. When your father's business went under, she said finally, you thought it was the lumber prices. It was the lumber prices. Arthur's father bought out 3 of his creditors 2 weeks before you signed the lease on the new workshop. Her voice had gone very quiet and very even, the way people talk when they've rehearsed something in their head for years and are terrified of it coming out wrong. Arthur came to me, showed me the paperwork, told me if I stayed with you, he'd call in every note your family had. You'd have lost the workshop. The bistro contract, your dad's house. I didn't say anything. I picked up the cold mug of tea myself, just to have something in my hand, and set it down again without drinking it either. So you left, I said eventually. I left. You let him win. I protected you. Her voice cracked upward, sharp. I took the deal. I married him. I lived in this freezing house for 4 years and played the part. And when he died, his family treated me like a squatter who tricked him into a marriage contract. I should have said something decent. What came out instead must have been a hell of a trade. His money for my 5 years. She flinched like I'd hit her, and I heard how it landed a half second after I said it. Unfair. Ugly. The kind of thing a person says when they want someone else to hurt the way they're hurting. I didn't take it back. I didn't know how yet. The rain started against the window, a steady tap against the glass. Neither of us filled the silence for a while. Is she his? I finally asked. Maya? Arthur's. Elena nodded once. Legally. Biologically. Everything. I felt something in my chest loosen that I hadn't known was clenched. When she was 3, Elena said, she found an old photo of us in my lockbox, asked who the man with the funny smile was. Arthur didn't want your picture in this house, so I didn't get to just explain. I told her you were a chef, that you knew how to make things strong when they were falling down. She looked up at me, eyes red-rimmed. Arthur looked at her like an heir to an estate. Marcus. He never once looked at her the way she looked at you tonight. I thought about the ugly thing I'd said a minute ago and didn't have anything to follow it with, so I just stood there in the cluttered kitchen and let it sit. The next morning the fog hadn't lifted. Julian was at the entrance with a clipboard and black coffee when I pulled up. 2 hours behind on demo, he said. Estate's legal rep called at 7. Wants us off the property by noon. Who called? Vance Sterling, Arthur's brother. Says the lease renewal wasn't properly executed after Arthur died, which means the property reverts to the holding company for liquidation. Elena's a co-trustee. Julian gave me a look. Since when do you care about trustees? We get paid either way. We don't get paid if the building's a parking lot, I said, and walked past him into the dark interior. Floorboards groaned under my boots. This covenant expired 5 years ago, a voice said from the doorway. Vance Sterling stepped in wearing a tailored charcoal suit and leather shoes that looked absurd on the dusty floor. He had Arthur's sharp jawline from the photos and eyes that did the math on a room before he'd finished walking into it. Vance Sterling, he said, not offering a hand. The local carpenter. Restorer, I said, and the covenant didn't expire. 10-year automatic extension, tied to the primary load-bearing supports. The main arch was replaced in '98. Modern Douglas fir. There's no historic protection here. He said it like a man reading off a script he'd used in other rooms before this one, and something in his jaw twitched, just slightly, like even he was tired of saying it. I walked to the base of the timber column and scraped a 2-inch mark through the dark varnish. Underneath, the wood showed tight-grained heartwood with a faint, sweet resin smell. Heart pine, I said. 1885. Your father didn't replace the beam. He cased over it to hide rot at the base. My dad put in the steel shoe underneath to save the original timber. Vance's smile faltered, just barely, before the mask came back down. Doesn't matter what kind of wood it is. My firm holds 80% equity. Elena's petition for co-trustee authority was filed late. Portland ratifies the sale tomorrow. She didn't file late, Elena said from the doorway. She walked in wearing a trench coat, hair in a neat braid, a blue folder against her chest. Behind her, holding her hand, came Maya. Yellow rain boots, a lunchbox with a frog on it. Chef Marcus! Maya yelled, delighted, the room's tension apparently invisible to her. Look, a frog. Vance's eyebrows drew down. Elena, I told your lawyer any property discussion goes through my office. My lawyer filed an injunction 2 hours ago. She pulled a stamped document from the folder. Temporary stay of sale, based on the historic covenant filing. Marcus is the court-appointed structural inspector for the Harbor District. His assessment is binding until the probate hearing Friday. You're burning money you don't have, Vance said, and for just a second something under the contempt looked almost like exhaustion. A man who'd been doing his dead brother's cleanup for over a year and was sick of it. You'll be broke before summer's out. She won't be alone, I said. Vance looked at me, then down at Maya, who'd abandoned her frog lunchbox in favor of trying to reach the brass scraper on my belt. Is this the strategy? Vance said. The high school boyfriend playing protector? The court will see through it in about 4 seconds. There's no conflict, I said. I'm buying the mortgage note. The room went quiet. Julian's clipboard hit the bar with a clatter. You're what? Vance said. My father's original partnership held a 20% buyback option on all historic commercial notes in this district, signed in '92. I pulled the yellowed document from my back pocket. When your father bought out the creditors, he forgot to extinguish the local option clause. I signed the transfer at 8 this morning. I stepped closer. I own 20% of this note, Vance. Any sale needs unanimous lien holder consent, and I'm not selling. He stared at the paper, jaw working, and for 1 second he didn't look like a villain at all. Just a tired man realizing the last leverage he had was gone, and he'd have to go home and explain that to people who wouldn't be kind about it. My firm will contest the option in state court, he said, but it came out thinner than it should have. Good luck, I said. He gave us one last look, grabbed his briefcase, and walked out into the fog. Nobody moved for a moment after the door shut. Julian picked his clipboard back up, gave a low whistle, and found somewhere else to be. Elena stared at me like I'd rewritten a law of physics. How did you buy 20% of a commercial note? That's tens of thousands of dollars. Sold my share of the Seattle partnership this morning. I shrugged. Was saving to buy my own shop eventually. Bought this one instead. Why? I looked at Maya, who'd given up on my belt and was now drumming her lunchbox against the base of the old pine beam. Because you spent 5 years in a cold house so I could keep mine, I said. Took me a long time to understand that. I'm not 5 years late anymore. And for what it's worth, what I said last night about the trade, that wasn't fair. I know that. She didn't say it was fine. She just nodded, like she was letting it go rather than pretending it hadn't happened. And that felt more honest than an easy forgiveness would have. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. Build something that isn't running from somebody's lawyers. You don't have to do it alone, I said. Can I help tear stuff out? Maya said loudly, looking up. I have boots. Elena laughed. Short, wet, the best sound I'd heard in 5 years, and pulled Maya into her hip. Yes, sweetie, you can help. Maya reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a second sheet of paper. Blue marker this time, slightly crumpled. 3 people in front of a building with a red roof. A man in a hard hat. A little girl holding his hand. Chef Marcus's new house, in big wobbly letters. Is this one right? She asked, watching my face with total, unvarnished gravity. I folded it once and tucked it into my breast pocket. Yeah, Maya, I said. This one's right.